Okay, well, welcome, Jennifer. We were just sitting here chatting about your very character-driven novel and love letter to Chicago is how we were reading it. So let me introduce Jennifer to everybody. Jennifer Close is the best-selling author of Girls in White Dresses, The Smart One, and The Hopefuls. Born and raised on the North Shore of Chicago, she's a graduate of Boston College and received her MFA in fiction writing from the New School. She now lives in Washington, D.C. and teaches creative writing at Catapults. Yes. So thank you so much for joining us this evening, Jennifer. We appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt the conversation. I just got nervous. I just wanted to make sure the link worked. So
yeah, no problem. No problem. So we were talking about all of the characters and, who was our favorite and whatnot. So I think, like one of my favorite ways to start off a conversation is just, tell us a little bit about the inspiration behind Marrying the Ketchups.
Sure. So I have known that I wanted to write a book about a restaurant for a long time. I worked in a restaurant in college and a little bit after, and I just thought there's just a lot of drama there. There's like a lot of room for, I don't know, tension and drama. And so I kind of had it always in the back of my mind. And then when I moved to DC, one of my really good friends here ran a restaurant, and her stories just every time we'd meet for a drink, her stories were just so amazing. And I think I started sort of like taking notes or mental notes and thinking about it more. And so I decided to set it in Chicago. I honestly can't even remember. I don't think it was really a choice. I think I just always knew it would be a Chicago restaurant. And I was really like writing it and taking notes for a long time. And in 2016, I had been working on it for a while. And when I say working on it, I like had other books coming out. So I wasn't totally devoted to it and spending all my time on it. But, again, keeping a notebook, writing some scenes. And then when the Cubs won the World Series, I thought like, oh, I really want to put this in. But once I did that, I sort of had to put the election in just because I felt like at that point I had the characters and I just sort of knew that they would be aware of what was happening around them. And that really shifted the book. I almost, in a way, all the characters stayed the same, but in a way I almost kind of started over, because if you've read the book, that it's kind of both of those things are like a really big part of what's happening around them. So that was kind of how it all came to be. And it did take me a lot longer than I planned. I think it was supposed to be done in like, I'm embarrassed to even say, I want to say like, well, it was 2020. It was supposed to be done in 2020. Yeah.
Did you write any of it during the pandemic then, if you were still working on it? Or
I wrote a lot of it during the pandemic, which I think it was hard for me to write during that time, which again, it was like nothing changed for me, but it was like I had probably much more time than I normally did. And still it was just like, it was kind of hard to concentrate. So I wrote a lot of it during the pandemic, which actually, what was fun about that is I love restaurants and I love eating out and meeting a friend for a drink or something to eat, and so it was actually really fun, kind of sad, but to write about Sullivan's, because I sort of felt like I was there a lot of the time. But there were so many times where I was writing a scene and I just thought like, I would do anything to be sitting at a bar by myself right now, ordering a drink with a book, like having something to eat. It sounded so amazing to me when I was writing those scenes.
Yeah, well, you definitely did a good job describing those scenes. It really felt like, I had a very clear vision of what Sullivan's looked like and the atmosphere that it was providing. So yeah, great job there.
Very nice.
So what would you say, we all read the final version of the book when you, because you did write this over such a long period of time, do you think from the time that you turned in your first actual draft to the final version, do you think it stayed pretty true, or were there a lot of revisions that went into it?
There were so many revisions. This one was definitely the hardest of my books to finish. And I sold it to my editor. So it works a little differently each time, but I've worked with the same editor for all of my books. So we know each other and we know how we work. So I'm comfortable showing her like stuff as it's kind of in progress, not really early drafts, but in progress. So she saw a lot of it. At one point there was so many other narrators. Every family member had at least one chapter. A lot of the restaurant staff had chapters. There's probably 500 pages that didn't make it in. Gretchen went to her high school reunion, which I actually really liked, but I understand why it didn't fit in, but it was very fun to write about. So there was a lot that just, there was a point where I think I got a little lost in the story, and I just kept writing and writing and writing. And those scenes just sort of ended up at the end. I took a lot of them out. So.
Okay. Well, this was, like we mentioned earlier, it's a, very character driven novel. I haven't read many of your other books. What is it about character driven novels that you enjoy the most about writing, and why you choose to tell those stories?
Oh, I like that question. I always say, I'm not sure there's too much of a choice. I think that's sort of like where my writing, like where my strengths are. I really, I love sort of like observing people and noticing the way they act, and figuring out why they act that way. And I think that sort of goes into writing a character driven novel. And I love character driven novels. I think they're great. But I am always working, like I'm trying so hard in my next book to think more about plot before it's done, because again, as I've proven to myself, I can write for so long without much happening, which is fine. I think that there's a place for each kind of book, but I also love reading books with plot. I love reading character driven books, but I also love reading books with plot. And so I'm constantly working to sort of make myself a little bit better at that.
Okay. Sorry, 1 second.
That's okay.
I'm getting these things stuck together.
Okay, baby. So the title Marrying the Ketchups, at first I was like, okay, why is this book called Marrying the Ketchups? And so during the story, we get the, the literal definition of what marrying the Ketchups means in a restaurant setting. Was there any sort of other context to the title reason for choosing it?
No, it actually, for a really long time, the title was Wait. And that was the title I liked, which it's okay if you don't have to pretend. Every time I tell people that, they're like, that's not a good title. It's like, but I really liked it because I felt like there was, the idea of like waiting for something to happen in your life, and waiting for the Cubs to win the World Series, and waiting for things to be different, and then waiting tables. So like, I thought it was just, that's what it was in my files for so long. And the first section of the book was always called Marrying the Ketchups, because I just think it's so gross, but so amazing and weird, and this thing that happens in a restaurant. And the first time that I was trained to do it in a restaurant, I was like, oh my God, I guess that makes sense that every time I sat down somewhere, they didn't bring me a brand new bottle of ketchup, but I had never thought about it. So I like never looked at it the same again. And so I thought that was I liked the idea of the sections being titled after sort of restaurant-y stuff. And my editor right from the beginning kept saying like, can we call it? Oh, that's so nice. I'm so happy to hear that. It's funny that the title drew you in, because, well, I'll get to that in a second, but my editor begged me from the very beginning. She just kept saying like, can we call it this? Can we call it this? And I was really adamant. Like, I was like, no, I really don't like that title. I think maybe you can see the cover of my first book behind me, which is called Girls in White Dresses. And it is about weddings, but I think I was nervous about having it seem like it was about weddings. And I have had a couple people be like, I thought that there was like a ketchup family, that there was going to be a wedding in there. But finally, she just kept like very gently asking me each time she would send an edit back or we would talk. And finally, it was during the pandemic that I just said like, yeah, we can call it that, call it whatever you want. I think I was just like so beaten down, or I don't know. And I remember she was like, wait, really? I'm like, sure, like it's fine. And once we started calling that, like, it is a really fun title. And I think it's fun that people get it. Like, that makes me happy to hear people say like, oh, I get it. It is funny though, when I say the title to people, I can immediately tell if they've worked in a restaurant or not, because sometimes they're like, what? And then other times they're just like, oh, I get it. And, the restaurant on the cover is really pretty, but yeah, it was not the original title, but I do think it was the right one. I think it's catchy, and I think that the cover, and I think even if you don't get it, maybe you're kind of intrigued. So.
That would be me. I didn't get it because I mean, I never worked in a restaurant, but then when I read it, I mean, I got it. And I thought, I liked it. It was catchy. And I mean, when you said that the original title might've been Wait, or I immediately just came to
Right.
mind that movie with Ryan Reynolds, Waiting, where he was a waiter
Whoa.
in that restaurant.
God, you're
That's
right.
what I
And
would
isn't
have.
that kind of a gross movie?
It's a little
They
raunchy,
do,
you know, like
yes. Oh no. Okay. All right. I mean, now I'm I'm extra glad. I forgot about that movie. Yeah.
I'm a big Ryan Reynolds person. So
Yeah.
like that would have been like immediately where my head would have gone, and I would have been reading a different book, I think. But so, well, you know, tell us, you know, who is your favorite character to write? And is it the same person that you perhaps relate the most to, or would those be two different people? Let's just dive into Gretchen and Teddy and Jane.
Yeah, for sure. Teddy was my favorite to write. I think because I gave him most of the food writing, and that was another reason that I really wanted to write about a restaurant. I love books with food in it. Like I love books that they don't even have to be about food centered stories, but I love when it's like, you know what they're cooking and it makes you hungry. And I think it like says a lot about people. I really like this one writing exercise that asks you like, what's in your character's refrigerator? Because I think that's really telling. So I just like love that. And I really wanted to include that in a book. Like Heartburn by Nora Ephron, I love so much. She has the recipes that work in there. So Teddy got most of that because a lot of the other characters describe food, but he cooks. And so he got like the heaviest food portion. So that was really fun. And I do relate to him because I relate to all of them in certain ways, but he tries really hard to be good. And I think that's more my personality than like, there's something about each of them. I mean, Jane does too, where it's like, she tries to be dependable on what people think. And I think that's more like me. Gretchen doesn't do that as much, but I do relate to Gretchen's sort of feeling about, making art of some kind and worrying all the time about what you're going to do and feeling a little lost. I think there was something really strong that I related to each of them, which I don't realize that when I'm creating characters. It's looking back that I think like, oh, that makes sense. That makes sense why I did that. Yeah.
Well, your explanation just made sense. I mean, I would hope that there's something about whether it's yourself or just something that you can relate to in each of the characters that you write. And so appreciate that. We were talking a little bit about, you know, Rose and being put in the home, and we were all kind of just wondering like, what was her deal with food? You know, because we're kind of talking about Teddy and food, and she was just like, was it just she wanted to stay thin, or what was
I think it was, I've been thinking about it a lot in the past, like maybe like 5 years. I mean, I'm trying to think of when I really noticed it, like the sort of generational attitudes around food. And I don't know if I'm alone in this, but I do think there's a sense of like, it's people younger than I am that I think I'm like so impressed. Like they don't have that same sort of like bullshit that I think we were taught, like I don't know how old everyone is. So it's like, it just ranges from whatever, but I guess like my age group, there was a lot of like, we ate like Snackwell's cookies and like age 12, you know what I mean? It's like, I like knew enough. I don't know. There was just sort of like always that sort of, it was there. And I'm not saying it's not in the culture anymore, but I do think that there are generations where it's like, they didn't think they could enjoy food or food wasn't enjoyable. And I found that really sad. Like there's that one point where I compare her and Bud and how much Bud loved food. And I just like, so I thought that was an interesting thing to put in, where I do think that that's not that it's gone or that it will ever be gone, but I do think there is something like from generation to generation that's kind of different or passed down, all of those things.
I can say I love my grandma's cooking. What Caitlin said, yes, I could see that, Jennifer. My grandmother's definitely had some disordered eating patterns. Amy
that's
said
so interesting. Yeah.
neither of her grandmothers enjoyed food. Oh.
And that stinks, right? Like there's such a great part of life. Like, yeah. And I don't know. So I did, that made me sad, but I liked writing about that. I thought it was interesting.
It was interesting. I mean, it definitely prompted some discussion within the group. So
yeah.
You're awful cooks. So one of the other characters that we kind of touched on and we just kind of wanted to pick your brain about was, why did you include Riley? You know, she was much younger and she brought a different level of or different aspect of drama to the story. So we were just curious about Riley.
Yeah, she was a later addition. And actually at the time I was working with a teenager who was very much the inspiration for including a teenager in the story. It was the most time I had spent with a teenager, I think, since I was one. And I had just kind of forgotten. I don't know that I'd forgotten. That's not fair, but it really brought a lot of stuff back of just like, sometimes when I would meet up with her, she would just be like so bubbly and full of joy. And sometimes it was like the world was ending. And I'm not even discounting how she felt, because I just sort of remember that like everything was really heightened. And I just liked the idea of including someone in that age group. And I also liked the idea of having someone, you know, she did have a couple of chapters from her point of view that didn't make it into the book. It's too bad, because part of what I liked about her was she like saw the Sullivans in a different way. She's part of them and also not. And I think that's interesting too, just the way different families can sort of be made up. You know, it doesn't always look like how you think it's going to. And and I liked that idea too, that they just sort of were like, okay, she's one of us, like she's welcome. So there was a lot that I liked about it. And I honestly just thought she was funny. I mean, the teenager I worked with made me laugh so much. I mean, she shocked me, she made me laugh. And so it was like, I think I love dialogue. And I think once I was with her a long time, I just felt like I really want a teenager's dialogue in there, because I like how unafraid she was to say things, you know, like she called people out. I just really liked that. Yes, and celebrity is a real game. It's so fun. I mean, you can actually like find it where people like come up. I mean, someone gives you a famous person, but it's really funny when you choose your own people, because people will choose the weirdest celebrities that you're like, I don't even consider that person a celebrity. And it is like a very funny part of the game. It's really, and that's right. Oh God, I love Hacks. I just saw that episode. It's so good. But yes, they were playing it on the bus. Yeah, it's a fun game. I wish I made it up. Ugh.
So Laura Beth had also asked, did you consciously choose to highlight politics before beginning writing, or was the political climate an influence as you were writing?
It was definitely an influence. You know, my third book was The Hopefuls, and that was a lot about politics, which I like went in knowing that's what it's going to be about. That was more about why people run for office and sort of that idea and what it does and means. And, you know, there was a lot of that. It was about characters too, but I had no intention of including politics in this. And then I think after the election, I like couldn't get it out of my head. And it wasn't fun to write about, honestly. Like there wasn't a lot of fun stuff happening. It was really heavy stuff that was going on, and I didn't enjoy that, but I also was in it. So I felt like I couldn't ignore it, you know, like, so, and I think I had to write my way through it. And I think also that's part of what took me so long, because I was still like going through it as I was writing it. And then I had to like take some time and go back and see how I wrote about it. But yeah, no, I think it like I hope the book is still funny, because I do think it casts this like sort of sadness over it, because it was, you know, it was a weird time. Yeah.
I definitely think the book was still funny. You have a certain kind of way of writing dialogue that I just found it to be entertaining, realistic, sad, funny, hopeful, all of the things. So, I mean, I guess just talk to us about how you write dialogue so well. Are there any tricks to it, or just becomes supernatural to you?
That is such a compliment. Thank you, because I love dialogue. I think it's really fun. I think, again, like, I think everyone has different, I mean, everyone in life, but like everyone has different strengths and things that they are good at. But I've noticed like some writers really like exposition, some like dialogue. I have, you know, there's so many things that I could be better at in life, but I have a really good memory, and I have a really good, I don't even know how to say it, like audio memory. Like I can remember specific conversations and I can remember really weird details. And I think as a writer, that comes in handy so much. And I just like, I am delighted all the time by the weird things people say. So like, I mean, I write things that, I'll write it down if I want to really get it, but I love nothing more than like capturing the voice of a character, or I like really voicey novels. Heartburn is, I keep saying it, but it's a really good example of like, just like a really strong, it feels like someone is like sitting down to gossip with you. And I love that. It's my favorite. So yeah.
I love it when it's well done, as yours is. And then recently, I read Book Lovers by Emily Henry, and I loved a lot of the dialogue in there. So I love good dialogue in books. So I was pleasantly surprised with Marrying the Ketchups. So
Good. Book Lovers is on my to read list.
oh yeah, definitely check it out. It's great. Laura Beth had a follow-up. How did you find out about Book of the Month, and how has this book being published been different from your others?
Oh, those are really good questions. And actually, I don't know if any of you are Book of the Month subscribers, but I had no idea. I've given it as a gift a bunch of times, but because I'm not a member, because I get so many books, or, but although I think I might actually join. Oh, and if anyone is a member, The Lifestyle by Taylor Hahn, who was in one of my classes that I taught and is amazing. And it's a really fun book. And that's a Book of the Month pick. But that makes me happy that that's how you got your copy. Good. Book of the Month. So they told my publisher, asked them about it. And I don't know if you like pitch, I think they probably pitch books that they think will fit for Book of the Month. So they told me, but I did not realize until I was on tour, and this young woman who worked in the bookstore, this was before it was announced, right? Because my book came out in April and it was a May pick. And she was like, I heard about Book of the Month. And someone on Instagram who was so sweet messaged me and just said like, oh, I heard your Book of the Month pick. And I didn't get a chance to write her back right away. And then she wrote back and she was like, I'm so sorry. Am I not supposed to know? Because it's like a secret, but I didn't realize there were all these spoiler pages out there, like people that like investigate and try to figure it out, which I think is just like really fun. So yeah, that's how I found out. I found out a couple months earlier. I'd have to go back and look, maybe 3 months earlier, that it was going to be in there. And I was excited about it because I think it's really fun. And how was it different? It has been it's been 6 years since my last book came out. I will say, I think there's like even more of an online presence and Bookstagram and all of that. That feels a little bit different. And I don't know if this is different, but it was much more exhausting because I have not seen or been around that. I was so happy I got to do in-person events. It was wonderful. That was the most I traveled and was talked to people in probably since the pandemic. So like I mean, wiped out. Like it was so fun. And then I would just go home and just sit quietly. Like it was a lot. And I remember it always being tiring because there's like a ton of adrenaline, and then it just sort of, and you're traveling and you're nervous and like there's all these things, but this time felt like especially just like I was kind of a spaz. I felt very deranged during a lot of it. So
we have a lot of Book of the Month Club members within the Peloton Moms Book Club. So we always love chatting about, what are you picking this month? And, you had mentioned the lifestyle. So I just kind of want to put this up there for everybody. This is the other book that Jennifer just mentioned. And you said you taught Taylor in one of your classes.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
She's so great. That's how we met. And then actually we, our agents, she has a different agent than I do, but they're at the same agency. And so now she's just a friend, and she's so great. I'm doing an event with her next Tuesday when it comes out. That's online, and it's a really fun book. It's super fun. And so she took a novel writing class with me at Catapult, but that book was already done. It's for her next book that I worked on. So yeah.
Well, being a teacher and being a published author, we do have some aspiring mom writers in our book club. What's a piece of advice that you would give?
Oh God, I have so many. I love giving writing advice. I think I'm just going to say Bird by Anne Lamott is a really good book if you have not read it. I'm sure a lot of people recommend it, but she talks about a lot of what I think is really important, which is like getting your ideas from your head to the page is a mess and it's hard. And like, it's going to feel hard and weird. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't write it. Like, just like get it down and fix it later. However it works for you. Like, I really like writing in a notebook early on because I think it's friendlier. Like, you can just write down, honestly, I think I was working on this book in a notebook for a long time because I was writing my other book. So like, you can write down ideas or questions like, does the restaurant burn down? You know, like big questions and little questions, like while you're figuring it out, you don't, or at least I don't know everything right away. I like write my way into the story. And so a notebook feels like I'm like gathering information, getting ready to type. But I do think, because I think this is something that I felt early on, like when you start typing, like when it's in your head, it feels so perfect. And you're like, this book is amazing. It's going to be so good. And then you start to write it and you're like, this is so hard and awful. And this is garbage on the page. And this is not worth it. And like, I just always want people to know, like, that is a normal step in the process. Like, that is how everyone feels. If there's a writer that doesn't feel that way, then I don't want to know them. Like, that's a normal part of it. That, and then just knowing too, like, you just kind of have to keep showing up. And that's such a boring part of it. But like, I also think sometimes people have this idea that like, if you're meant to be a writer, you'll write, but like there, you have to practice, right? Like you get better and you have to show up. And I have gone back. It's something I've done on and off for years, but to logging my time when I'm writing, because you start to see, and it sounds really obvious, but like the more you sit down, the more you write, which like, no kidding, you know, but then it's like, and I schedule my time. Like I protect it, I schedule it because I'm never like dying to sit down. It's because I think there's a lot of like anxiety that comes with it. But I'm always happy when I've done it. So like just sort of knowing like, well, this is my time to write. I'm not going to think about it. I'm just going to sit down and write. So that was more than one piece of advice. I'm sorry, but I feel really passionate always about like telling people they should just do it and write, and all of those weird feelings are normal.
That is good advice, and no problem that it was more than one. We appreciate it. Laura Beth said your description of writing sounds like me with exercise.
I swear to God, I'm not lying. I use exercise as an analogy all the time because you know how like when you're like in a great exercise routine, you just like do it and it's not, you don't even think about it. And you're like, I can't believe I would ever go more than 2 days without exercising. And then when you just stop and you go 2 weeks, you're like, I can't believe I ever exercised every day. Like that's how writing is. It's just like, I say it all the time because it's like really like, I also schedule exercising too. So like, that's clearly like the way that I get my brain to work. But yeah, it's a lot like exercising.
I'm going to scroll back up to, Malia said, I loved the chapters or details that added to the story, but in an offhand way, like the chapter about restaurant people dreams, how restaurant people treat wait staff when they're eating out. And my favorite, Gretchen's top 5, 6 songs of the 90s. How and why did you decide to include those parts of the book?
First of all, thank you so much, because those were also my favorite parts of the book. And I did not, there were so many more of them. You know, the Cubs chapters are kind of their own thing, but they're the same idea. I really like books with short chapters, and I just like surprise little chapters that come up. So I really wanted to do that. And I know why it didn't work, but when I say there was like a bunch of the wait staff that had different like pop-in chapters, there were so many of them that would just like pop in and tell a story. There was Brendan had one, Riley had 2, like it did kind of overwhelm the story, but I just really like those weird things. And when we started kind of working to narrow them down to make sure that like, snack toast is so good. We can talk about that later. Yeah. But when I started to narrow down like the ones I wanted to keep, I was really firm that the Cubs chapters were like the ones I wanted the most. I really liked those. I really liked Rose's Bloody Mary chapter. And I really liked the songs of the 90s. Like and the server dream. So like I kind of picked my favorite and just made it so that you didn't lose the thread of the book. Cause at one point I had so many in there that I think it kind of interrupted the flow of the story. But I had a lot of fun writing them. And they're some of my favorite parts of the book are those. Yeah. And snack toast is delicious. It's something we used to make at the restaurant where I work, and it's so good. Yeah. Oh, I think you were on mute.
Yeah. So what is the recipe for snack toast? Is there like some?
Used to like toast bread or roll, and then put chopped up onions, tomatoes, Laurie's seasoned salt, bacon, and then melt Swiss cheese on top of it. I don't even know. Now I want it. Now that's what I want right now. It's just this like weird mix of things, but it's so delicious. It's like I don't even know what it's like a fancy grilled cheese with mayonnaise and Laurie's seasoned salt, but snack toast is a better version. Yeah.
It's funny that you mentioned Rose's Bloody Mary. Emily Reardon, she sent me over Rose's Bloody Mary mix, the recipe, and I told everybody I will share it in the Facebook group later so that everybody can try it out for themselves. So, and now we'll be able to try a snack toast. So.
Yeah.
Laura had asked, do you like to write short stories or mainly novels?
I learned and kind of, I was gonna say grew up on short stories, but I don't even know if that's short stories are what I wrote for so long because that's really what's like taught in a lot of workshop classes in college and in grad school. I think partly just because it's like easier to contain, but I do also think there's like a lot of, I also love reading short stories. There's a lot of value in starting writing short stories because I think it's helpful to see how to finish something. Like everything I was saying about the way it feels when you're writing something, if you've never finished a piece, which there are some people that have just go straight to novels. But I think if you've never finished it and know what it feels like, it's a lot more overwhelming to get through like one giant 300-page thing. I have not written a short story in a long time, but I think honestly, maybe some of those short chapters were from like, they're not short stories, but they have a lot of what I love about short stories, which is I think you can be a little bit weirder in short stories. And Girls in White Dresses was sold as a novel and stories, which it is, but it's a novel, it's stories, they come in and out. And I was actually kind of obsessed with Girl's Guide to Hunting and Fishing by Melissa Bank in my 20s, like really, really obsessed with it. I love Elizabeth Strout, who writes the Olive Kitteridge, sorry, why did it just sound wrong to me? The Olive Kitteridge, that's the name, right? But she does something really fun. She writes a lot of short stories and she has characters that like cross over books, like she does, and she's so literary and genius. So I love reading short stories, but I haven't written one in a long time. Yeah.
Well, I know you said this one took, over the span of like 6 years since your last book came out.
My next one will not take that long.
I was about to say not to, put the cart before the horse, but are you working on anything else right now?
I am. Yeah, I'm working on a story that takes place at a country club. And like, I think I maybe let myself, maybe because also it was the pandemic and like deadlines fell through, but I think I let myself write too long. And then I had to cut a lot, as I've been talking about. So I am determined to get a complete draft of this next book done in the next 6 months. Like I am really, we'll see, you can check back with me, but I am not taking as long anymore because I don't think I took it. I think I just sort of wandered. Like, I don't think it was really helpful. So I'm not doing that again.
Okay, well, we'll keep our eyes peeled. Caitlin loved all of the 90s nostalgia and the comfort food in this book. I loved all the 90s nostalgia too. Laura Beth had asked.
He's right about Dolores. I think I did something which I don't always love in books. I think I said years later. I think I did like a fast forward, like because I really wanted to talk about it. Like I think I said something like years later. Yes, it was set in 2017, but I think the way I phrased it sort of like jumped ahead in time, like years later when she would learn she died. I think I did it because I really wanted to I really wanted to include that. It's kind of cheating, but I remember when she died, just thinking about those songs and being like, oh my God, I forgot about them. So yeah, I think I cheated a little bit just because I really wanted it in there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that, Caitlin. I did recall thinking, I was like, wait a minute, what?
I know
But
there's
that
so
makes
many
sense.
things like that when you're like, but when the fact checker catches it and you're like, but can't I just keep it? Because it find it in there.
Right.
Yeah.
I usually like to end our discussion, and if anybody else has any questions for Jennifer, feel free to chime in, because we're going to wrap this up in a few minutes. So be thinking about what you'd like to ask, if there's anything else that we didn't cover already. Laura Beth had asked, what books would you recommend to us out now or coming soon? What are you reading, recommending, loving?
I am ready. Okay, so right now I'm reading Olga Dies Dreaming, which I'm sure probably you've seen. It's really good. And it has just like the best first line. Like I remember I was like, someone told me this was good, but I have to read it because it's so good. The telltale sign that you are at the wedding of a rich person is the napkins. I mean, like what a good first line. I just got this one, The Latecomer. And I am still reading this other one, but I did kind of start this one too, because I was really obsessed with the plot when it came out like 2 years ago. So we'll see. It looks kind of dark on it. This one I read a while ago, but it's so good and recently out. Let's Not Do That Again by Grant Ginder, which is so fun. He's very, very funny. And it's just like, there's like politics and family. Like it just is a really enjoyable, smart read. Isn't this a pretty cover? I was very jealous of it. Yeah. And then this is, I do not read a lot of nonfiction, I have to say, but this Bomb Shelter by Mary Laura Philpott is so good and beautiful and also funny, but like she gets to all these things. I feel like whenever I read books, fiction too, but I feel like you're reading for that moment where you're like, oh, me too. I felt like that too, even if it's like someone in a totally different experience than you have. And she's really good at that feeling where you're like, yeah, I've thought that, I felt that. And it's just so wonderful and great. It's really beautiful. I like
That's the
it
only
so
one that
much
I
to
haven't
talk about
read.
it. Oh, you would really like it, I think. I mean, it's one of those books that I honestly think like is such a wide range of audience. You know, like my mom would like it, and so would my best friend. Like there's just like so many different people that would like it. Not that they're so different, but
Yeah, she actually reached out to us the other day and wanted to send us a copy, and I was like, yes, please, I'd love to read it. I've been on the My Library wait list for a while now, so
yeah.
that works out good. And circling back to Let's Not Do That Again, one of my pet peeves about books and marketing is like when you give this really awesome blurb and you're like, okay, I'm gonna love this book, and then you're like, how did this blurb encompass this book? Well, I love the reference on it's like perfect for fans of Veep, and that is so true.
Oh,
It
did
is
you?
perfect.
Yeah, it was Veep, and there was like God, was it like Veep meets whatever? But that is a really good. I know what you mean. Like that's a spot on. That's a spot on description. Yeah.
Mhm. And I have a feeling that you're going to love The Latecomer. It's a long family drama book, but well written. So
So but it must be different than the plot, right? Like it's not.
it's definitely different. Yeah.
Which I'm fine with. I'm actually I find that interesting that she wrote this, like, I don't know, like the plot was almost like a thriller, but there was so much writing in it. So I love that. So I'm excited to read that one. Good.
Yeah. You can definitely tell it's written by her. She's got a style that is unique. Okay, I'm going to get to Laura Beth's question. Did anybody else have anything for Jennifer? Okay, well, let's wrap it up with Laura's question. If you have it, tell us about your author writing community that you are a part of, and feel free to drop names. Just give us a little tidbit about that.
This is like honestly one of my favorite parts about being a published writer is like I've made a lot of really good friends. And I was saying, I don't know, it was at some event the other day, but like I just feel like you need people going through the same thing you are at that time. And also just like as a reader, I feel like it's really fun. Like sometimes I'm still like, I'm friends with these writers, like I'm friends with them. Courtney Sullivan, who wrote Maine and Commencement and Saints for All Occasions, and her last one was Friends and Strangers. She and I have the same editor. And so she was probably like my first writer author friend. that I made. And she's just the best person. She's so funny. She's the kindest person you will ever meet. Like, she just does a lot of good in the world on a big scale. And then also just like personally, like she's the first person to send like flowers or food if something's happening. Like, she's just a lovely person. And she was really helpful to me because she had already had a book come out. So she was like kind of telling me like, oh, it's going to feel like this. Oh, you're going to feel like, she like sort of gave me the heads up. And now I just love gossiping with her. Grant, who wrote Let's Not Do That Again, is another really good friend of mine. And he and I met, I blurbed one of his books, and then we met. And he's another one. Like, I was actually so happy that our books came out the same month because it's so stressful. Like, it's obviously so fun and such a wonderful experience, but there's so much stress. And I feel like instead of like crying about things, he made me laugh. He would just text things and I'd be like, okay, this is like, thank God. Like, we would kind of complain to each other, but like also just laugh and make fun of everything. So he's another one. Who else? Now I'm blanking. Those are really my main two, I think. I mean, there's a bunch, but I have to say it's like writers are really nice. Yeah, they're just lovely people. Katherine Heine, we have the same editor. She wrote Single Carefree Mellow is her first one, but the last book is Early Morning Riser, which is really funny. Did you guys read that? It's so good. And she lives in DC, so we get lunch all the time, and she's also just like, yeah, she's just a wonderful person. So yeah. I like her.
Oh, yeah, that cover was a good one. Well, thank you so much for joining us this evening, Jennifer. Tell us where we can find you on socials.
I am Jennifer A. Close on Twitter. I'm now double checking, and then just Jennifer Close. Oh no, I'm sorry. I'm Jennifer A. Close on Instagram and Jennifer Close on Twitter.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we will be sure to give you a follow.
This was really fun. Yeah. Thank you for having me. This was nice.
Yeah, we so appreciate your time, and we will continue to promote and share our love for Marrying the Ketchups with our close friends and in the group for those who couldn't join us live this evening. So thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Great. Thank you so much. You guys are so nice. Thank you. You made my night.
Thanks.
Have a good night.
Have a good one.
Bye.